All right, we're at the sewing machine. I am using my Bernina number 57 foot. It has um, a gated foot control on it, and I love it for doing this sort of thing. The other option that I'm going to use is I'm going to use a locking stitch so that when I start, I put my needle exactly down here and I'm going to sew to the end. I did, my sides are really nice or my ends rather, are very nice and glued together so they're not going to shift. And I'm going to show you why that makes a difference. So we're just going to zip through, and because those are glued together, there's absolutely no shifting. I found that no matter how hard I tried, I ended up with shifting and I wasn't happy with it. Because I've marked my pieces, I'm not getting them turned about. I always know that my shoulder is going to be sitting up here, and it's very easy to get this stuff turned about or not know where you are. So that's just like a map guide, a little milestone, if you will. You may not need it. I did, and I'm not embarrassed to share with you my stupidity and the cues that I needed to make this work. Your needle up, needle down function, if you have it on your machine, will help you throughout the process for sewing these diamonds, because we're trying to hit a mark and we're starting interior to the piece rather than on the end. You'll want your needle up position. I do have a knee bar, but I'm so used to sewing on my other machine that my muscle memory is such that I automatically just grab. All right, so that's how simple it is to sew our diamonds together. If you'll remember from our initial video on where the bias is, by making these seams first, we are enclosing this bias. We still have bias on this other side. This is straight of grain. Now we're going to go to the ironing board and we're going to open these up. If you're working in production mode, we've taken these from the machine. We're just going to turn them over and rotate them. So that way, well, it'd be helpful if we clip them apart. We can just open them up. This is straight of grain. This is straight of grain. So don't be concerned about putting your iron there. Some people say don't iron these. I have better luck when my seams are nice and flat at every step of the way. And that's why I diagrammed for you where the bias is, so that you can be confident and comfortable that you are working in a safe area on your block. Now, the only way to make a good LeMoyne star is to make several bad ones so that you solidify your learning process. So do not be concerned about making bad stars. You can put your bad stars. I had some so bad I had to throw them away, but you can make your bad stars into a shopping bag. You can make your bad stars into a hot pad. I like to glue baste my seams. So I just run a bead of glue. I'm making sure these match up, and I'm feeling for it. And you can look for it too, all right? Or pin it, however you like to do it. And I'm just setting my iron down. Because this is straight of grain, this is straight of grain, so you can feel confident that you're okay and you're not working in a danger zone. All right, at this point, if you've got a 1/4 inch foot, you can line up this mark here in a way that is situated correctly on your machine. Otherwise, you want to make a mark. And I'm going to use my Marty Michelle and a Pima pen. I'm just going to make one dot. I can see this on my machine, but I'm going to take it to the machine for you. I'm going to drag you through each step of the process so that you can see how it's done. Now we're going to go to the machine. We have the same setup as before. We want our needle up. We're going to come down exactly. Use a locking stitch or take a couple stitches forward and back stitch. I use my locking stitch because my Bernina seems to have a mind of its own sometimes. It takes an extra stitch on the back stitch. Sometimes it doesn't. All right, so now we have 2 pairs together so that we can make a half. I'm going to go to the ironing board now. All right, because we diagrammed this, we know that this is how our star is going to be situated. And that means that this is an inset, this is a square, this is a triangle inset, this will be a square. So what that means for us then is that we know that this is straight of grain, this is straight of grain, this is straight of grain. And wherever we have our square insets, which will be here, this is bias. All right. We know that that's bias, but we've already enclosed that. So you can feel comfortable ironing and handling this edge here. And you can already see that there's some unraveling, and that's also your cue as to the status of that edge. All right, to put this together, I like to first feel and look. I also like to use a pen. Now remember, I'm going to have to open this up because sometimes it's when you go through too many layers. So that's where the intersect, you may not be able to see it, that's the intersect of those 2 seams. And look through the front. Can you see my pen? And then we're going to just put it here. Now, you have to choose a seam direction. And Adita spins her seams, and I do the same. And I was not a very good demonstrator. But every time I sew a pair together, I push the seam to the left. So choose clockwise or counterclockwise and stick with it. It doesn't matter which one you choose, as long as you choose one and stick with it. So as you can see here, all of these seams are spinning around this way. And they're spinning. And I've got a nice flat join here. Now what I like to do, well, we have to do 2 things. Thing number 1 is we're going to have to sew this, but our corners have to stay free. And you just want to, however you like to make your mark. I like to use this tool. We're going to sew from here to here. But before we do that, because this is the money shot seam for us, I am going to use a long basting stitch. I know where I want to be, and I'm just going to test it. Okay, I just went to my machine. I used a very long stitch, as you can see, the longest one on my machine. And I'm just going to open this up and just make sure that I like the way it looks, and I like the way it looks. When you're starting out, I recommend that you do this. Once you've made many of these, you might feel very comfortable with your other visual cues. But I am doing this video presuming that my audience is the frustrated, exasperated folks that I was when I first tried to make this. The other nice thing about when you take a basting stitch is you secure that that junction, and it's not going to move on you. Now I'm just going to take it to the machine and we can see that step. All right, this is really the last mark that we need to make on the method that I'm going to demonstrate, and we're doing it just as we did the others. We are going to set our needle down in the hole, take a locking stitch or go forward a couple of, I'm going to set my machine back, and I'm just going to sew. This last dot, looks like I did that a little bit too far, frankly, but that's okay. We can always pull things out. That's why one of our needful tools is our seam ripper. All right, now we're going to go back to this ironing board. So we're at the ironing board. We've made our stitch. We're going to open our project up and admire with pride, or our cheeks will be stained with shame. I'm okay with this. And we're going to turn it back over, and we're going to just spin the seam. So just grab it firmly. You're not going to hurt it. Take your right hand, or however you've done it. You might need to do it the other way depending how you spun your seams. But twist in opposite directions and do it like you mean it. If you've got a little threads that are recalcitrant in there, just pick them out with your seam ripper. Now remember, we still have bias in this block, so we want to be careful. I like to kind of open this up, and I want to make this flat. And I always use a pressing sheet to do this. It just gives me comfort. And I know when I'm pressing on the front of the block, I'm not going to get a sheen on it. So this is what we're starting with. Now remember our orientation. This is not where we do our inset. This is the meridian of the block. All right. So this is my method. You may wish to use others that you've seen, but this works for me, and that's why I'm demonstrating it to you. What I like to do, and I follow Adida's way, is we're folding it, and I find when it's all together it's easy to work with rather than working in pieces. My very first thing that I want to do is run a bead of glue and set my insets. So we're opening it up, folding like a book, and we're opening it up. The eagle beak tweezers are wonderful for this, and the reason we clipped our corners is so that we know exactly, here's our visual cue, we're nestling it right there along the side of the shoulder. All right, this is why I like this method. So I always know if I'm in the weeds or not. This is a bias edge, but I've got glue on it, so I'm just setting my iron down. I'm not doing anything else on it. And I'm just going to glue this one side for now, since I'm here. This gives me my initial stability. It lines things up so I know when I'm under the needle. Sounds like I'm getting Botox or something under the needle. Like under the knife for surgery. We're doing quilt surgery here for our LeMoyne star. You can pin this if you like. I'm just used to doing it this way, so when I don't do it this way, I feel lost. So pin it if you like, but I'm going to show you the beauty of what we're doing in just a minute. Okay, remember this outside edge has bias. This isn't bias, this is straight a grain, but these have bias. So just always know. Probably a good thing for both quilting and life to know where your bias is, right? And try to handle our biases very carefully. Alrighty, so this is all done, and what I'm going to show you here first what we're doing at the machine in case it's confusing to you. Okay, we're going to remember I think the biggest part of the LeMoyne star is confident handling of your fabric. Okay, we're going to go to the machine, but I am going to use Shar Jorgensen's method, and I'm sewing from the outside tip, and I'm going to sew all the way off. If you've got another LeMoyne star, you can shove your next one off, and you can chain piece. But that's what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you why that works. And you can see, because we stopped 1/4 inch, math does work. Because we stopped 1/4 inch and we're sewing 1/4 inch, we're just going to graze by that corner. And because we are using tools that will help us when I'm at the machine, and I'll show you this, I'm going to take this corner and just tuck it out of the way so we are free and clear. Now, then once we're done, we have to sew the other side of it. And I had another way that I was doing it, but frankly, I wasn't getting as consistent a results. And I get a flatter block if I turn it over, and then I put a little glue on this side, and I'll show you that in a minute, not to get too far ahead. But let's go to the machine and we'll sew our first set of stitches. Okay, now my machine setup is going to be a little bit different. If you have this, I'm going to set my machine up so that the needle is down. And again, remind you, I have my 1/4 inch foot. I've glue basted my first set. I want to work with my inset on top for this pass. So I'm going to fold it like a book. Fold this out of the way. And then I'm going to set my needle, shove my piece right up against my needle, right up against here, and you want to stay straight. It's important that you sew straight and true. So now I'm going to show you what I'm doing with this corner. I'm grabbing it, and I'm just pulling it out of the way. You can use whatever tool that you like to help you with that. I'm not chain piecing at this point. I'm just going to sew each of these on. I was glue basting the entire inset, but frankly, I was getting inconsistent results, so I did change that. The real beauty of this is just to sew off the corner. Now, if you open your seams up, you would want to do something different than this. You could Shar Jorgensen's opens hers up, and you can watch her video to see how she accomplishes that, but I do not. And frankly, if you picked a little bit of that corner in there, you can just pull it out. It's not, it's like pay now or pay later. I'm going to pay now and just get it out of the way so that I know it's out of the way. I'm moving on to my next. Lining it up so it starts. If you've got, I pulled my straight stitch plate off, but your straight stitch plate, if you have one, works well here. We have one more to do. And again, this is just our first pass. So we still have to do the other side. Okay, now this is important, and I'm gonna get this out, this shot out a little bit more so you can see it, so we're not so close in. All right, we've made our stitching line, and we're in the corner, and I want you to remember the concept of a spa corner, and I want my corner to line back up with my visual cues. This flat corner I want to line up. So if you have to, take your seam ripper and just take out a stitch if you have to, so that it's loose. So you want this corner to be loose. Now at this point, you could just sew right here, but I'm going to put a bead of glue so I know that this doesn't shift on me. Now at this point, I'm sewing off the other side, and this is what I was doing, that I'm doing differently than I was doing before. And I'm not trying to say this to confuse you, but rather to tell you there's different ways to do this. We could sew it here, and then I could just put my needle down right here and sew. But I found that I had better results, and I thought about this one morning, when I actually turn it over, so that I can see how this back edge is, because I've got these, you know, acute tails here, and so I can monitor better this seam line, because if you're not careful, you'll get a little pucker. You don't see a pucker, but you'll get a pucker where there's almost a little bit too much fabric from the white. So I'm going to show you this way. So you do it however you like. But I was doing all of them the former way that I showed you, but I think I'll get better results this way. And I'm at the corner here. I'll show you when we get there. Here's the corner. This is what the corner looks like. Look, I'm just tucking this out of the way. And we're still sewing. If we sew right off that corner, we're all good. You see how that works? So you have to develop your preferences. And the other thing I want to show you is this. Remember, this is bias on the left, bias on the right. So I'm going to show you when we get to the ironing board, but we want to work from the center and smooth this out. Don't work from this way and push it down that way. That's what I learned from experimenting with different methodologies. Your mileage might vary, but I'm just sharing you my trials and tribulations. All right, I'm ready for my next corner, but I'm going to work from the back. And let me see if I feel comfortable doing this without glue basting. You know, it's like training wheels. You want to make sure that everything is lined up well. And I'm just going to tell you, I would prefer to glue baste, and I'm going to do that. So I've turned my work over, but I'm going to put a little dab of glue on there. Guess I'm showing my OCD, but once I get used to doing something a particular way, I just don't like to deviate, and I really do. I rely on glue a lot. I'm going to turn this flash off and see if that gives you a little less glare. Okay, this is nestled in. You can just pull it out of the way. Don't be afraid. And even if you take a stitch, you've got your stitch ripper, and you can pull it out. All right. So there's our, see how nice and flat that is? Let's check how it is when we open it. And we've got a nice flat firm seam, and let's keep going. Oh, I meant to pause you on that. So I did my glue basting. I'll edit that out. This is long-winded enough without you having to wait for me to glue base something. All right, I just pulled it out. Be confident with your fabric management. If you don't have these eagle beak tweezers, you need to get them. They are really a wonderful tool. And again, just so that you know I'm not crazy, this is going to give us a nice join here. Except I think I was a little bit short on my stitch. Sewing these together, so I have a little bit of a gap. Actually, it's not a gap. Let me show you. Okay, I'm going to show you a mistake that I made. You see, that's not a good join. You see, it's a lazy. That's not good at all. I didn't pull my corner out, so just watch how I'm going to fix it, okay? So I'm just picking these stitches out. I'm going to pick one stitch out here, and I just need to pull this over. So that, you know, there's very few things that you can get wrong, but this is an example of when the front of your block doesn't look right, the fault is always going to be in your stitch, your seam control. All right, and let's look at it now. Okay, so I don't have a gap. I don't have a gap now. All right, so mistakes do happen. That's why visual cues are helpful. So I'm just going to unpick one stitch here. I love this seam ripper. If I wouldn't sew if I couldn't have my eagle beak or my seam ripper. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I've determined that I'm going to pin this. Since most of you are probably pinning, let me pin this and see if I can make myself do something I'm opposed to. I don't like pins because I think they distort. And again, it's muscle memory. It's what you're used to doing. But you know what? I can't do it. I'm sorry. I just can't do it. I have built up so much muscle memory. I just am not able to effectively work otherwise. All right. I accept my shortcomings. And your stitches should meet in a perfect X. And we will evaluate our corner. And our corner, well, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. All right, now we're going to go and I'm going to show you how to press this. Okay, now we're at the ironing board, and I want to provide you a couple of admonishments. I have found that the best way to approach this is, you can do it any way you like. You can put your pressing sheet up like this and just kind of smooth it from the center out. I'm not touching the bias, and I've got to push this seam down. So our seam is going to go towards the diamond, and I'm just smoothing it out. And I found that if I just did this small smoothing and make sure that my seams are the right way, and then I'm just pressing my iron down, I'm not moving it. It's on my pressing sheet, and I'm letting the heat give me this beautiful, turning my work, doing the same thing. I'm just gently letting that diamond come to its natural point. I found that if I work this way down, I was getting strange spread. So this is just a simple thing. It works for me. I hope your mileage won't vary, but you see how careful I'm being. My seam is going the way I want it. There's my pressing. When I tried other methods that did not allow for pressing in between, I had not very good results. You may be much more capable than I am. Again, I accept the fault of my sewing failures. Okay, my seams are the right way. I'm just setting. Now, yes, I do know that my iron is hitting the bias, but I'm not moving anything, and I'm not concerned that I've got a problem. Okay, this is our last one. Again, smoothing it. You see what this is doing? When we smooth it, we're forcing this bias edge to stay straight. If we're going in this way, it's going to push it out. That's my unscientific explanation of it. Okay, my seams are the right way. All right, now, the very next thing we're going to do is just cut our, you can cut it with a ruler and a rotary cutter, however you like. I'm just snipping these. Because we're oversizing our insets, you can see that we've got plenty of room for when we do our trim. And if you don't trim these, I think you'll be sorry. All right, the very next thing that we're doing is we are insetting our squares. Now, I am not insetting and then re-gluing the second phase of it. I'm just going to glue this first phase because I don't have any long tails. And because I don't have any long tails and I've got a secured corner, I found that I didn't need to do that. And it does cut down on time. Again, remember, because we're oversizing, we're always working on our inside corner. Remember, we've got bias on both of these sides, so I'm not handling that anymore. Fold like a book, open it. Going to inset our next one. These flat corners will really help you. I think they help me, and I feel like if I have good visual aids throughout my process, that I can do my problem solving. Just like when we saw the gap, I could immediately see there was a gap, something was wrong. Well, I had a crooked seam. So, and even though I love glue basting, you know, if you're not careful, you can still get your pieces wrong. Another way to use glue basting, you can also put a pin if you'd like. If you put a pin right there, you can rotate your piece as a pivot. So that's another strategy you might want to deploy in making this block. Okay, we've got one more. I used to glue baste all my insets, and in fact I did a whole video on it, but then I woke up with a great revelation about how I could save some time, and I tested it. And then I found a couple of more techniques that I wanted to share with folks, which is what I'm sharing with you today. All right, now we're going to go to the machine. We're going to do the very same thing. We're going to sew straight off the corner. We're going to pull our work back, and then we're going to turn it, rotate it, and then sew it again. As before, you want your seam ripper and your tweezers if you're using them. Right, so I'm pulling my corner back. So I'm starting on the outside, and I'm just going to sew right off the edge. I have a little glue in this corner, so I need to get that out of the way. And if you're chain piecing, you can add something else here. Now, I don't find that I have to work from the back side for this corner, so I'm just making sure I've got a spa corner, meaning that when I pull it, I'm able to line it up. So I am weaned off of my glue basting for this. I'm just making sure it's lined up with the diamond underneath. And then I'm going to open this up for you. Let's check our seams. Our seams look good. And we've got a nice flat corner. All right, let's work with the rest of them. The nice thing about learning how to do this the old-fashioned way is that you don't have to work with long strips, or you can do things more organically with diamonds versus having to work with strips and follow a strip method, which is nothing wrong with that. The only thing I have a problem with is the half square triangles. It's like, okay, that's not really a LeMoyne star. It is a star, but it's not a LeMoyne star, and you end up with fabric that's going all kinds of goofy ways because you've used two pieces to make one. Okay, I'm just bumping up my outside shoulder, the top shoulder. So on our diamond, we have a top shoulder and a lower shoulder. I'm bumping up my needle. My needle is down right against that top shoulder. Just lining up everything and making sure that it's straight. And sewing off. So the difference that we're doing here is I'm not glue basting this other side. And I'm not sewing from the opposite end of the other side. So again, we're folding our piece like a book. I'm pulling this back. My inset is sitting on top so I can see my corner and everything's out of the way. Lining up everything. I'm pulling this corner out of the way. I got very excited about the glue here. I normally stay out of the corners, but I was a little overzealous. We want to make sure that we have a spa corner again so that when we pull it, it lines up with the top of the shoulder, and then the side is right here. I'm not pinning, I'm just smoothing everything, making sure that everything is smooth. I don't have to do a locking stitch because I'm sewing off the corner, and I'm just going to show each of these to you so that you see them. We'll see them better at the ironing board. Okay, we've got one more to do. Once you get a rhythm going, you'll do all this automatically, but I'll have to say I had to use like the mantra when I was watching Adita's video, fold like a book. Of course, not having her beautiful and charming accent and sparkling personality, but until I adopted these techniques, I couldn't get those things. I just couldn't get my stars to work. So these few changes, oversizing the insets, using glue basting, and sewing off the corner using Shar Jorgensen's method, and using Adita's method for creating the star to begin with. And other teachers show that as well, and it works for a variety of reasons because of the bias. Right now we're going to go to the ironing board and iron this out and then trim it. All right, as we look at our star, it looks kind of goofy. That's because it needs tender, loving care. Now, the seam push on this is going to be towards the diamond. So for all of these pieces, the seam pushes towards the diamond. Now, you may not like some of the buildup in the corners, and you can adopt another method. I'm not bothered by it. I don't have a long armor to please. I am a short armor, a short cursing armor, because I'm using my domestic machine. But I did do a quilt suspension system, so I hope you'll look at that. Okay, so that's how we're pressing. So just keep rotating. Coax your seams. Now we don't have to worry about any bias. Everything is out of the way. Now we want to just make sure that we have a beautiful press. I will also say that I believe that pressing is as important of any of the techniques that we're using for the cutting and sewing. This seam has so many, this block has so many seams, and they come in a confluence, and we're working with acute points accordingly. We need to have special care to get the results that we need. Alrighty. Get yourself a pressing mat. You could use, I don't use steam at this point. Sometimes I find I get crazy wrinkly things. If you have a join that looks weird, then always check your seam like we did at the sewing machine. But I think that we can agree that we've got a pretty good result here. All right, now what I'm going to do, we're going to check the back. Let's look at what the back looks like. So you can see the seam push always towards the diamonds. And as Adita explains it, and it is true because I tried it other ways, it keeps the star on top of your background. Right now I'm going to, in preparation for trimming the block, we're going to press it. And I'm going to press, because I know all my seams, I'm going to press from the middle first. And I'm not doing any back and forth. I'm just setting my super hot iron. I will probably burn my house down. I actually have burn marks on my hands from where I hit it. And this will help us when we press, and I'm going to show you how we're going to press it. Excuse me, on how we're going to trim it. Okay, the other thing I like to do is now just go on the diagonals. So this is giving everything, all the fabric, a chance to settle where it needs to, because we're using a pressing mat. I don't have any shine. Okay, I'm going to show you how we're going to cut this. I like to use Deb Tucker's Tucker Trimmer 3. What I like about it is that it's got a center line and the diagonals that I need. I want to show you a couple of things about it. So we are doing a 5-inch center. We're going to trim to 10 inches. So here's my 10-inch mark here. And you can see that we've got plenty of room all the way around so that we can take into account any shifting. But I can see that I've done pretty well here because my diamonds are well on these diagonals, except if you look at this one, it's just a small amount off, but that's okay. Not every one of these can be perfect. There's just no way it possibly can be given the substrate. But what you can do is jiggle your ruler and get the optimum . Okay, that's our first pass. And even though I'm looking at my 10-inch here, I'm still just making sure I'm lining everything else up. Okay. And there we have a perfect-ish LeMoyne star.